young Alexander dreamed of elevating his status through the engagement of war. As captain of New York artillery, Hamilton was noticed and honored to become aide-de-camp of General Washington. After the war, Hamilton crafted his ideas into the U.S. Constitution and Federalist Papers. As Treasury Secretary, he further united the states through a strong central currency. Experience AlexanderHamilton.live. Some of the great things that have happened here. Hello, welcome to Independence Hall. My name is Alexander Hamilton, and I'm happy to answer any question that you may have. And where are you from? Oh, very nice. Very nice. Oh yes, the grand plan that was put up by my I don't want to say an acquaintance of mine, Pierre Charles L'Enfant. He made the grand design for Washington D.C. I actually met him just after the Constitutional Convention in New York, and he was in New York, and he was actually establishing a beautiful altar place inside of St. Paul's Chapel. Which is actually part of it incorporated the very first war memorial to anyone for the United States that were delegated by the gentleman here. They actually did that in January of '76 before even signing independence. That was, of course, to General Montgomery, who died in the Battle of Quebec. But I'm sorry. Your question again was. Sometimes I go off on tangents.
My question is, where are you buried so I can visit your gravesite?
Trinity Church in New York City. Trinity Church is the main church. It's the Anglican church. But unfortunately, it was actually burnt down. And so myself, I don't have a lot of strong ties to the church building itself. None to the present edifice, basically, because it came way after I was there. But the burial grounds were always still the same. The church was burnt down ever since we left New York City, Manhattan, with the retreat after the Battle of Brooklyn. And then we did all of our services in St. Paul's. Once again, even I remember with the general, when he took the oath of office to become president, following, we went down to St. Paul's and had a mass service there. And that's actually where you will find the original of that seal right up there. That is the first seal depicting the United States of America. It is the first visual representation, and it's still there at St. Paul's. So if you visit my grave over at Trinity Church, please make sure to also go over to St. Paul's. It's the original building and well worth the look.
Excellent. And the 13 arrows are to represent the 13 states?
Oh yes, the ones who started it all. Took that great leap forward in order to rebel against the strongest empire in the world, and then have the audacity to consider that we know enough about life that we can govern ourselves and break away from the millennial-old tradition of hereditary rule. It really was quite amazing to what the gentleman thought here. But when we say 13 colonies and then 13 states, must impose upon you that in reality it's like 13 countries. Different languages are spoken, different religions, just different cultures, really different people. And to bring them all together in this room, form a country. It was really quite an amazing tale of how we got it all done. Easy enough during the war. Anytime that you're fighting a common enemy, it's easy to to get together and to achieve that goal. But then after it really started, we started infighting. Basically, every trade routes, of course, money, and it all goes down to the ideas of power and money, and that's how we started to fight with each other, each with our own currency. There was nothing binding us together. This was a league of friendship under the Articles of Confederation. So we taxed each other at will. We manipulated each other's currency value to our own at will. It really was atrocious, and it was self-defeating. And so soon after, after getting the Bank of New York situated in '84, I had the Annapolis Convention, where I was able to bring together a little less than half of the men here, into Annapolis, Maryland, just to meet and to get them to understand that we need to form something better. And they, of course, went home and it worked. And basically, after that, we met back here for the Constitutional Convention. Of course, we didn't call it that at the time. But there's an interesting side story, because you know how the Constitutional Convention kind of worked out. But I'm sorry, I'll answer. I go off on tangents if you don't have a
say that having a common currency is what really united the United States?
No, I would say foundationally is the laws and the Constitution, which unites all of the people of the United States. It binds them together in a new type of contract, which was hitherto basically unseen on the world. And it gave us powers to not only rule ourselves effectively and efficiently, but to grow as society grows, to then encompass the needs of future generations. The currency is really just a small part of the grand plan of the power of a great nation.
Well, I would say my point is that having a strong economy is a very powerful way to unite a disparate group of people, and your key being the treasury itself is a fundamental part of that.
Yes, and that was what was so hard to convince these gentlemen after we had our own country to have a single currency, and the whole idea of a strong central government where we can put resources to work in different parts of the country that they themselves are not generating the tax revenue needed for example, to put a mill or to build a canal. We need to work together and utilize our resources efficiently and effectively to grow this great country, especially in the underdeveloped areas of the country. And then belonging to that geographic region, the possibility to increase your enterprise basically is greater. And it's a degree of safety. The more prosperity you have in a society, the more upward mobility of peoples you have in society. This just in general, by human nature, it brings people there. And this is really a good, not to get away from currency at all, because by all means, I can explain to you how it's essential for the strong currency to bind us all. But really, the power, the right to vote is really behind it all, because the chance to vote for anyone who was born in Europe or England is it's non-existent if it does not already exist for your father. Because there's no upward mobility. You, of course, have to be a white male over 18 who belongs to the Church of England for England. And you have to own property. Because if we look out at society for the hundreds of years living under feudalism, and then after we start to raise ourselves out of there, the old system, which treated us not as equals, but as different levels of society, still existed. And so when we give the right to vote, we did not want to give it all everyone in society. And this held true even with the creation of the United States. We wanted to give the right to vote to really as little, the largest pool of qualified people. But what is a qualified person? And so this is, well, the property requirement was the easy one, and that's why people came here, often indenturing themselves because they don't have the money to bring themselves here, and so they'll work for land. And once they have land, they then have the right to vote. And their opinion matters. What they say has an effect upon policy. It's not like if you do not vote, then what is the worth of your words? Yes, we can be humble and consider them, but they hold no weight past your breath. Whereas the power to vote is essential. This is one of the reasons why the moniker of no taxation without representation took place. Because even though in New York, as in London, only 3% of the population could vote. But here in the colonies and where I was at the time in New York, uh, more than half of the population at some point was an indentured servant. So this is now 50%. So they are eager to get that property, to get that right to vote. And that's that possibility of that upward mobility that is only true here in America. By the way, just for a little of historical context, the property requirement to vote was only lifted in New York in the mid 1830s, and that was only for white men. African men only got it in the 1860s, and then women another late into the 20th century, early into it. But nonetheless, at our time, we also considered the new government that we're forming and how much voice those who can vote have. And we chose the House of Representatives as the only place where your voice actually matters. Your vote matters. And if you make an irrational choice, if you make a choice where you are encumbered with emotion and you vote your emotion instead of your reason because you are not a person capable yet of discerning emotion from reason, then you live with your mistake for 2 years. But the senators are elected by each state's government. And then the Supreme Court is nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate, who, of course, come from the state governments. And then the president, who is elected by the electors of the Electoral College. And the electors can vote any way that they want. Now, they are chosen as per the rules designated in each state. So each state decides how they're going to choose their electors. But as you can read in My Federalist 68, the purpose of the Electoral College serves as a bulwark against emotional judgment. When the mob has been taken over, as I've experienced in my life in New York, it is a horrible thing. And the decisions that can be made, we do not want to be affected onto the highest office in our land, the presidency. And so if the people do make a bad mistake, the elector is specifically charged with the authority to make the correct choice in the view of what the people really want. Now, this is the way that it is originally written and then stand, but in the last year, the concept of what you call a faithless elector has now been basically turned into an illegal act across the board in all 50 states by the decision of your Supreme Court. So it's really quite interesting. Are in one way trusting people so much more with the power to vote. But yet, when you talk about money and currency, you are going away from my life where money is tied to honor, which is tied to understanding the person, which is tied to, basically trust is the key part of it all. And you're going to a trustless system with a blockchain ledger, which, by the way, as a student of ledgers from St. Croix, I know a great bit amount. And of course, your blockchain ledgers are business efficiency. But it's interesting, you're creating systems that take trust away from money, but you are putting more trust in the people in terms of politics.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm glad to by.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Sure.
Hello, welcome. This is Independence Hall in Philadelphia. My name is Alexander Hamilton. We were actually set up for a play that we're going to be having. A play is called The Debate for Independence. It's coming up next week. So you can visit alexanderhamilton.live to be a part of the play. It's really quite nice. It recreates the debate for independence in June of 76. Would you happen to have any questions or areas of topic you'd like for me to discuss? And where are you from?
I'll turn on my mic. Can you hear me now? Hello.
I'm sorry, say again?
Can you hear me now? Turned on my mic.
Yes, I can.
Oh, hello. Nice to meet you. I have no specific questions. I'm from the UK, so independence seems like a silly idea to me. Stay under the crown.
You could have had all of this great continent for yourself if you would have just given us our representation in Parliament. You know, we were English citizens, and you did not, and you started taxing us, and we don't have a way to at least have the voice to say in the House of Commons that we protest against this. You know, there are so many great English orators who spoke in our half. Mr. Burr, he basically coined the term that we are sons of liberty here in this great continent in his speech in 1765. So why you chose not to simply and quiet us down is beyond me, but that would have been a interesting outcome if it took in place.
I suspect you'd wanted too many seats than we have. Struggle
Yes,
with
but
our
we were eager to
United
change.
Nations. Have limited seats for our Welsh and Scottish and Irish brothers and sisters.
Yes, yeah. The group. And when you have a fragmented group, itself cannot stand. I believe you're going through an issue of politics and geography right now, as well as economy, with the problems of the Irish Ireland.
It's an interesting piece of history, definitely. I guess
we actually tried to get some of the provinces of Canada as well. We came very close to getting Quebec in late 1775. Very close.
Really?
But there was a battle on the upward town, a battle on the lower town, and every single in the lower town battle was killed, except for one. His name was Aaron Burr. Later on, I was to meet him. We would share a similar story, as we were both orphans. We both the same age. We both served in the military during the Revolution as officers. We both left and became lawyers in '82, challenging the bar exam. We both served in the circuit together. And then our paths diverged as his soul wandered through the elements of personal self-interest. And I dived deep into the subject of the possible greatness of this great nation that we have here. And that man by the name of Aaron Burr eventually would be the one that killed me in a duel of honor in 1804.
My sympathies. So, with my ignorance, but what influence did the French have upon the situation?
Well, when we declared independence, in July of 1776,
Mm.
nobody in the world agreed with us, meaning that France was not on our side. The almost eternal enemy of Great Britain, you would think that they would jump up at the bit to go against Great Britain, but they did not think that we can pull it off. Not think that we could win. It took a great many battles starting in 1775, really, up until the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. After we were finally, we convinced the French, and then they started to give us support at first, and the level of support gained and gained. And then it was only after that, and we won a little bit more, that we were able to convince the Netherlands, for example, to loan us money as a country, as a recognized body of individuals. Of course, if the Dutch, being very mindful of their currency as bankers, if they don't trust that we are going to exist as a country, they would never dare give us a loan. But they did, thanks to Sir John Adams and his perseverance in getting that money so needed by these colonies. But it's interesting that this country, this great country of America, celebrates its birthday not on a day that it won its independence, which is what most countries of the world do. After they win their independence, they say, yes, we are a country, and they choose that day to celebrate. But nay, here in the States, we celebrate the day that we said we're independent, not when anyone else agreed with us. The Treaty of Paris in September of '83 was just a formality of legalities about rights and separation of the concept of war and the soldiers and the from the evacuating army into a peacetime regime. It's really just a legal paper. That's why we thought really July 2nd would be the great day, because that's when the men from this room agreed upon the concept that we are independent. And then they agreed upon the exact wording of the declaration on the 4th, and hence signing it on that day is now the day that we celebrate.
I see. I'd like to ask more, but I don't know more. So sorry.
That's quite all right.
So the issue must have been more than just seats in Parliament for representation. Sure, there was a tax element, was there?
Well, that's really the crux of the issue, is that the taxes that were being placed upon the colonies seems logical enough, because the French and Indian War, 7 Years' War, had just ended a couple of years prior, around 62 or 63. And so that war was a tremendous expense for the crown. So that expense, basically, the crown borrowed greatly for that war. They won, defeated the French, so they now have all of this land, but they need a means to pay for it. And so the logical thinking, well, let's have the colonies pay for the endeavor that took place there on the land. It seems logical enough, but because of the American spirit, which had been carving its own life and existence out for 160 years at this point, the independent spirit that we all felt from creating our own lives from the wilderness is really separates us from the spirit of the common man in London in the mid 18th century. And so when a simple stamp act was placed upon all paper, unfortunately, this was one of the worst taxes to place, because in essence, if you're going to tax an item, to tax paper means that everyone who can read, the educated element of society, are affected the worst. So all the newspapers now cost more. So what are the newspaper men going to complain about? Well, the tax. Lawyers, every legal document that a lawyer must produce now they have to charge more for that to their clients. So now you've angered all of the legal-minded men in all of the colonies. When you put together just those two elements, it is ripe for, let me put it politely, discussion. But our point of view must be heard. And petitions are sent. We start to, and we at this point are fragmented into 13 different countries. I mean, we are colonies, but there's a reason why we're not all one colony. These different colonies have different cultures themselves, and different religions themselves. And so once we basically get the parliament, we convince the king, and he convinced parliament, that's the way we like to think about it, to repeal the Stamp Act in the next year in 66, we were in such great support of the king, for example, that the golden statue of King George III on a horse. That's how much we loved him. He got the Stamp Act repealed. But of course, as things go, the very next year, Parliament starts passing more acts. They basically want to be all powerful. They were tired of playing second fiddle to a powerful, omnipotent, really, monarchy that has existed since the Magna Carta. They've been struggling, Parliament should be struggling power from the monarchy, or if how you want to look at it, the House of Lords from the ruling lord. But nonetheless, the House of Lords did not want to grant us not only a voice, but basically we have the audacity to think that we can influence them, that we have a voice being so far away. So non-consideration of us as people struck our, especially because we are loyal royal subjects to the crown. We are English citizens. So why, if we leave the shores of England, do we lose our citizenship? That is simply not, it's not so. That's not written down. That is not the law of the land. Why is the House of Lords really making that the practice? And they keep going, and they keep insisting that they have the power to tax the colonies. And that tax basically goes on. New York basically has a tremendous fight with it. Also not wanting to pay the tax to quarter the troops that are there. So basically now you have the troop stationed in New York is one of the worst places because you're sleeping outside. I'm going up until eventually and that led to its own riot in New York in 1770. By the crown for them to achieve so many good results for the economic situation that was going on with the East India Tea Company. Nonetheless, by providing us tea at a cheaper than market value, albeit with a tax, how can anyone argue with that? Except when it is placed in more terms of common sense. For example, I have the power to demand a penny from you, a single cent. If you acquiesce to power, then there is nothing stopping me from making it a dime or a dollar. So the acquiescing to even that endeavor of a cheaper tea is too much for us. As I said, we've been creating our own lives for 160 years at this point. We are still students of the Scottish Enlightenment. We are understanding life and we're getting a greater confidence that we can live by ourselves.
So at what point does the American identity crystallize? Where do you see yourselves different from being British or English? What point does that come up? You think?
Well, in creating an identity different than the British, the war did a tremendous amount for the average citizen who was not pro-revolution to look at the monarchy and the actions of the monarchy and want to disassociate themselves with that.
Must have been thinking about that a long time before.
Well, it's an evolution, most definitely. The evolution it happens at different members of society at different times. The Sons of Liberty considered themselves to be Americans, well before, a decade before we even had the concept of an American country. But others, it took 100 years later. So it granted up in steps. Some basically, when it suits their mood, or suits their advantage, they will say yes to the United States. But then when it suits their issue more to be local, they will proclaim their local sovereignty more.
Yeah, sure.
And even today, if you ask the people from the United States, where are they from? Or for example, if they are traveling abroad, they come to your country and you ask them where are they from, they just might say the United States. Whereas a person from New York, not unlike myself, would say New York, because there's a stronger identity to the city and the state, versus other people who live in different states, they will say America. And that's just a cultural way how it was not homogenous and uniform in how we started to see ourselves as an American. It happened over time.
Maybe because New York's more of a melting pot of different races, nationalities.
It very well could be. There were 18 languages spoken there when I was there in the 1770s. So it's always had that element to it. And we can trace that really mindset to the trade-minded Dutch who were there prior, versus other places that took on a more religious tone due to being settled by religious groups. New York was really settled by traders, and the ability to understand people in a different way in order to interact with them in the financial dealings. So yes, we do have a different outlook on life here in New York. We like to think that it starts in New York and spreads out through the rest of the states at times.
The colonies didn't start in New York, did they? They spread. I think they spread up to New York.
Well, the oldest continually habited city in all of the 13 colonies is Albany, New York, the capital of New York. That actually dates from I might not get it exactly correct, because Jamestown is 1607. There were 16 teens, I will put it. But of course, Jamestown, Virginia is no longer settled there. But since the 1600s, there have been tremendous exploration throughout all of the colonies. And really what it is that we see good land. Good land is good for farming. But once you create a corn or wheat or something, that crop, if it's only for your family, well, then that's okay. But if you're doing it to sell to a market, then you need to be close to a market, or your product will go bad. But if you can grind your grain into a powder, then your product will be good for months and on end, from days and weeks to months and years. So in the early 1600s, explorers went all up through all the different waterways of the 13 colonies, looking for the water power where they can establish mills. And this is a little bit different than how the French basically handled the exploration of Canada, which was done through fur trading. So you would have outposts as they went all throughout Canada. But for us, once you establish a mill, then as farmers bring their goods to the mill, they have to pay the mill to grind the corn or the wheat. But as farmers, they probably don't have money because they have not sold their crop yet. So an easy way for a farmer to pay is to simply pay in flour or cornmeal. And so now the mill has some extra stuff to sell. So also the mill can offer things for sale, for example, shovels. Then once you have more items, one might say, well, would you like to have a drink? And then you start to establish a bar and a restaurant. And more people come to tend the bar and the restaurant, and to work basically the more farm fields that are around. If they don't want to be a farmer, they can start to coalesce there. As you have too many people drinking, you might have someone come in to start to establish a religion and a church. So this is the elemental way how in the colonies in the 1600s we spread out. It was through a nuclearization that was created by mills around water rivers that created the water power for us.
So I get the understanding that initially the very first colonies almost didn't work. It almost failed. What would have happened if it would have failed? It was a failed experiment.
Yes, some of our very first colonies did fail. Sir Walter, Sir Francis Drake, I believe it was, tried setting up a colony with Queen Elizabeth in Roanoke, but that did not work out. And we really don't know what happened to the early settlers there. Everywhere that we went to, from the great explorers like Henry Hudson and Italians like Verrazano and Cabot, going around in the 1600s and doing their explorations, choosing a place to live. It's interesting that not most, but many of the early settlements have their own unique story as to why they settled where they are. Sometimes it was really out of really ignorance. They don't know any better. Like Jamestown was settled on a salty island that basically couldn't grow that much, and the water was brackish. That's why to move. But then you have other places like since the Dutch did the hard work in New York of settling it, it was easy to keep that growing. The religious reasons why we have Rhode Island settled from a breakaway religion that started it up in Plymouth. So that's how we got that colony, and very similar then to more into Connecticut as well for religion. And these are the pilgrims that were leaving, the really not wanted really by the monarchy, and a lot of yes. And then we have Pennsylvania, which is the Sylvia, the woods, the forest for William Penn. His father owned a lot of money by the crown. It was Charles II. I could be wrong about that. And the crown decided to, when the son came and asked for payment, and he also negotiated land in order to take away a lot of the Quakers, the monarchy was very eager to oblige. The land does not cost the monarchy anything. It's doubtful that people that go there will survive. Doubtful at best, as I've seen all throughout the early explorations. And William Penn will take the Quakers, who are pacifists. If you're a king, really one of the last things you want is to have a society that will not fight for you if you're invaded by a foreign country. So taking the pacifists away would also serve the self-interest of the monarchy. And so that's how this city here, Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, was formed as the capital. And then, of course, this city particularly was where the different rivers come together. Schuylkill and the Potomac.
We also hear about, sorry, the thoughts that the Vikings may have landed too. Do we think?
Yes.
Do we understand why they didn't stay? Obviously, it's rich, fertile.
It's unknown as to why they didn't stay, but their exploits are, of course, written down in their sagas. The Vikings, we've talked about them here in this room because besides the Greeks and the Romans, the Vikings were really the next ones to create a working democracy in
At,
but it is those.
sorry, at this time then you're discussing in your era, was the Vikings were a known entity? Were
Oh
they? Were
yes.
they a thing? So they're not a modern concept that they'd found the lands. You guys actually
No,
knew at
well,
the time that they'd been there.
Norsemen.
Norsemen,
Correct.
yeah.
We called them Norsemen. That's
Sure.
what they were to us. They're we're just lucky that their sagas are written down in, and doubly lucky that the people of Iceland today can read that writing from 1,000 years ago. Because, for example, even for me in the 18th century to read Chaucer in the original is very difficult, and I know 5 languages, so it's English language has evolved over time to which it becomes unreadable in 1,000 years, but that has not happened with the Norsemen in Iceland.
But your
question was, say again?
Did they leave anything behind as a culture?
Well, I've only recently found out, because we did not know in the 18th century, that there is a settlement in Newfoundland at a site called Oxon Meadows. And that is an established Viking or Norseman stronghold here in the world. And knowing that that exists, when you correlate it to when that happened, which is just before 1000, I believe, and the sagas from that time, they talk of great exploration to the west of Iceland, which then, of course, went to Greenland, to which there are many stories written about sails to Greenland. But then the next step past Greenland is then Newfoundland. Then after Newfoundland, the Viking sagas say they went to a place called Vinland, and we do not know where Vinland is. There's vines growing in different places up and down the coast, New York City being one of them. But so which Vinland were they talking? If they were talking about Nova Scotia today, or Cape Breton, or somewhere around the Cape of Boston. Some people have said, well, Martha's Vineyard could be it, but the land is too salty there myself. But
they were transient.
So
they came and they died out or left. They didn't leave any kind of settlements. Cool.
Correct. It's not really until the Hanseatic League is formed. This is now hundreds of years past the heyday of the Norsemen, where they start to become a kinder trading partner. Let me say.
Interesting, yeah. That's interesting. And as well, just completely showing my ignorance now. Is there any infiltration from the other side of the world? From the
Any infiltration?
Pacific side of the world? Is there anybody coming in from there attempting to exploit East or West Indies or whatever people were searching for at the day?
Yes, the foundation of the discovery of North, Central, and South America really come from the discovery of gold and silver, to which the Spanish are the main protagonists of this endeavor. They actually found a whole mountain of silver at a town called Potosi in Bolivia. And so the wealth coming out of from the Aztec and the Incan empires, all the metal wealth that was coming out passed through the Caribbean islands, and then hopefully back on over to Spain. And so Spain, having basically such a big footprint going in, also crossed over to the Pacific side. Maybe it was De Soto who was the first cross over to the Pacific side, though I could be wrong about that. But he, so that basically led to the exploration going up into Los Angeles. These were cities that were created in the 16th century versus on the West Coast, the 17th century.
Sure.
The
Okay.
Spanish did also have a settlement in St. Augustine in the 16th century in Florida. But yeah, so their explorations did go to the Pacific, and there were Russian groups that came over through as well.
Yes, that's
but we really
kind of
would
what I was
not
thinking.
encounter.
Anything
Yes,
from the Asian continent coming that way? Or is that
yes.
for
So
their
yeah, the
culture?
Russians, they were the only ones that came through. Of
Yeah.
course, we know
Yeah.
now that many thousands of years earlier, there were the people that we call native to this land where they migrated over. But that is
Sure.
really going back in time. It's an interesting story, though, if I may add.
It is, yeah.
We did not find out about, for example, the Russians in the west coast of the colonies. I'm sorry, of the United States, well until, for example, after the purchase of the Louisiana Territory by our president Thomas Jefferson from Napoleon Bonaparte of France. Once we bought this, basically, I credit to that I basically gave him, and from the Great American Dollar, um, and Jefferson also. Well, basically, after buying that, he sent two men out, Meriwether Lewis and a Mr. Clark, to go and explore the land and to see. And then they took 2 years, 1804 to 06, to explore and to see what comes back and what did we have out west. They brought back mastodon tusks and tooth and great tails and great amount of ecology and biodiversity that they sent back, as well as stories about the different Indian tribes and making it finally to the coast. But they were up in what is present day, it's in the Northwest in Oregon.
It's fascinating, tell you.
The irony of that story was that Thomas Jefferson, who is lauded as a great man here in the United States, and he is a great man. He's so great that he has a bust of myself above his entryway in his house. And of his bust is basically directly across as well, because we stand in eternal opposition to each other. He was completely against my plan to create a strong American dollar and a unified American credit, which is what he used to buy Louisiana. He fought me tooth and nail for the entire effort. And then when I wanted to create a bank in order to simply facilitate the payments on all the bonds that we basically sold to fund the American Revolutionary War, he basically challenged me on it, saying that this great country of ours is now founded on the Constitution, and the Constitution does not grant the Secretary of the Treasury to create a national bank. But I pointed out that it does. Because in our Constitution, which is really the power that we took from the states to solidify into the master plan of the government, single government, strong government, it says that we can do everything that is necessary and proper, the function of the government. I am Secretary of the Treasury, and I am telling you that a bank is necessary and proper for me to pay all these people that we owe money to. So Thomas Jefferson fought me fiercely again when he bought Louisiana. Where in that 4-page document does it give the right to a president to be a real estate broker, buy land? It does not. But then he basically mimed my words exactly, saying that everything necessary and proper, that it is necessary and proper for us to secure our borders. So, as we're dealing with Thomas Jefferson, I feel the way that I was dealing with most men in this room. It is not convincing them that I am right that was difficult, but convincing them that I was right sooner. That was my greatest trial throughout this whole endeavor.
It's quality real estate.
Hey, touche. Did you know President Trump and myself, Alexander Hamilton, we share something in common with the history of the United States? We are the
Oh dear.
only two gentlemen to create a branch of the military in the US. I created the Coast Guard originally as a revenue cutter service for to make sure that the tariffs were being paid in the cities and not being smuggled into smaller ports, and that became the American Coast Guard. And then of course President Trump created the Space Force in America. That leaves the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, which were all basically created by act of Congress.
Mm.
But that is where my similarities to him end, but not to his similarities to my story. For after the war, when I went to New York City in 1782 and became a lawyer challenging the bar exam, because there was a great need for lawyers in New York at the time because all Tory lawyers were fired. We don't want Tory lawyers arguing the brand new cases, that we just finally got you to evacuate New York City in 1783. So they made it a requirement. I'm sorry. They dropped. They made it easier, and both Aaron Burr and myself became lawyers in 1782. I opened my first office on Wall Street, 55 Wall Street, and Aaron Burr opened his office at about the low 40s. Today, Aaron Burr's office is the Trump building on Wall Street. And
Wow.
as Aaron Burr said, when we went off on one of our carriage rides where we rode the circuit judge going off into Westchester, he considered politics to be a most profitable profession. So I think that idea has laid its foundation in that ground, and it percoled up into the president's thinking as well.
Well. Unfortunately, your ancestry bubbled up into is it Mr. Murdo in the south? We've seen the qualities of certain legal professions.
Yes, and that's really
Sorry,
this has
I'm not
always
having a
been
dig.
our issue.
Just
How do we get virtuous men into politics? That is the hardest thing to do. How do we get men of virtue to want to take on the responsibility of governing the people? It is so difficult. Again, Aaron Burr, to which I'm now referring to a lot, the man who eventually killed me in a duel, he was the first person to actually politic and to campaign for his office. Campaigning for office was something that was not done in the 18th century. I'll let you know how it worked in the 18th century. For example, General Washington, our first president, he shared a story with me when we were out at camp one night, and he told me about how he was running for office when he was much younger in the town of Alexandria, Virginia, to be a vestryman. And because you don't go around and tell everyone that you want to be the vestryman of someone walking around saying, I want power, well, you don't necessarily give him power. And so you let it known to your friends that you are willing to take this office, and then they put your name forth. But then on election day, the electing poll station, the poll station happened to be at Gadsby's Tavern. Simultaneously, that night, George Washington opened up a bar tab at Gadsby's Tavern, which basically we still have today. It is impossible for a single man to drink that amount in one day. So basically, as you went in, vestryman at that time with Lieutenant Colonel Washington. That is probably how politics worked. But unfortunately, with our election of 1800, we had achieved so much, but we were thrown back. Because I'd say we achieved so much because after George Washington, our first president, after he ran for office and was unanimously elected, he wanted to retire after the 4 years. But that we convinced him that the country was not on firm footing, that he must run again, to which he did. And then after his second term, he basically wanted to stop, and we acquiesced, could not convince him anymore. And he retired. 1996, John Adams became our second president. He only, though he was a fellow Federalist with me, we did not seem eye to eye. I was not part of his cabinet, and basically we actually fought against each other, though we were of the same political party. He lasted one term. The next president was a tie. And at the time, the way that the election was run was through the electors, and each state who created its own way to nominate an elector, to have an elector, each elector was given 2 votes. Not to separate them for president and vice president, but you have 2 votes. Vote for 2 different men. One of them have to be from a different state than your own. That being the only rule. And this was meant as a way that we can kind of pool our understanding together, so simply everyone does not just vote for their own state candidates. Well, unfortunately, the way that it worked out was Thomas Jefferson was tied with Aaron Burr. They were both in the same political party, the Democratic Republicans, and Aaron Burr was well known to be the vice president. He was not running for president per se. He was running as an associate to Thomas Jefferson. And when Thomas Jefferson won and Mr. Burr had the second amount of votes, he would vice president, all would be well. But now that they tied, Mr. Burr had a legal right to be president, the same as Thomas Jefferson. And instead of bowing away and simply stating that he will do what was expected of him to do and to be vice president, he decided to campaign. And he campaigned for the office so rigorously that Thomas Jefferson then wanted nothing to do with him. Eventually, because the voting, once it happens for the Electoral College, it's a tie, then it goes to the House of Representatives, and it tied again for over 30 times until finally I put my weight in. I had the choice of who should I put my influence behind. Is it going to be Thomas Jefferson, man who completely disagrees with me on every point of politics and policy, or Aaron Burr, a man to which I have so much in common, but a man of no principles? I decide to vote for principles, and I put my weight behind Thomas Jefferson, and then he became president, and Aaron Burr then basically we went to New York because he was not really accepted in the cabinet of Thomas Jefferson. Nobody wanted to talk to him anymore. The audacity to campaign for the office. And then it was 4 years after that when he tried to run for governor of New York, and I put my weight against him again. So he was denied that election. After that, we got into the quarrel about a language that I spoke one night at a dinner party in Albany about some despicable things that he had done. So it was not my word to describe the actions as despicable, but a man who was there at the dinner wrote a newspaper article saying that I said certain things about Mr. Burr, and he could give a more despicable account if need be. And of course, Mr. Burr takes this newspaper clipping, sends it to me, and says, "What more despicable things can you say?" And well, after that, we could not be resolved in our differences, and we had to resort to a duel. Taking 10 paces, turning and firing at each other, to which I received a wound dying the next day with my wife by my side back in New York. Aaron Burr, still the vice president of the United States of America, is charged with my murder, but is acquitted because there are no witnesses. All the seconds had their backs turned and no one saw what was going on. We made sure to choose a piece of land that not even the owner could see. So he has plausible deniability of this illegal act, a duel, happening on his land. And so he was acquitted. But being such a man, he actually went off to try to create his own country in the area of Texas, to which it was thwarted. And he was again charged with high crimes, this time with treason. But he was acquitted because of procedural matters at the time. There's a lot of interesting stories about our beginning and what Thomas Jefferson tried to do in establishing the power of the presidency. For example, saying that Aaron Burr was guilty. Putting in the newspapers, the president of the United States says that this man is guilty of a crime, even though he's not been officially charged, nor, actually, I'm sorry, at this point he has been charged, but he has not had a trial yet of his peers. And here the chief magistrate of the country is basically proclaiming his guilt. That does not go very well for the balance of power in our country. And so it is our later Chief Justice, who was our fourth Chief Justice, actually, not that the first three weren't great, but John Marshall, who heard the case and told the president that he cannot do this. You have to stay out of it, to which President Jefferson said, okay, I will stay out of it, but I will pick the jurors, though. You will stay out of it except to pick the jurors. So there was some issue with John Marshall and President Jefferson at the time. And that fighting led to Mr. Burr again being acquitted of those charges. But he basically was a person not really welcome in polite society. But nothing great ever came up of him. But the guns that were used at our duel are today in the New York headquarters of the bank that he created, which was Chase Bank. They still have them today, but they don't put them on public display because, well, it's Chase Bank, and they have a connection to Aaron Burr, who created the bank only as a financial arm for a water company he created in New York, a water company which went bust after killing a couple of hundred more people. Water company went bust, but the financial arm continued as a bank. So many stories in our nation's great history.
Indeed. I think, well, my position in the future has warned me of a low battery, so I might not be on for long. But absolutely fascinating listening to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. You're always welcome.
That was my next question. Where do you end up next? Where does this go?
Where does this all go?
An experience end up?
Good question.
Can't disappear, can it? Surely.
It will disappear. It will, the foundation to which the laws, basically the laws of science to which this is built will no longer cease to exist as a platform to which we all negotiate ourselves in. So I'm still trying to take this and to put it someplace, to create it someplace. Maybe if there's, but I am Alexander Hamilton. If I can build this world and code myself into existence, I know that I can achieve something else, and I can continue to bring American history to the students using virtual reality in a room like this. But please do go to alexanderhamilton.live, because we are doing a play here in a couple of days. You might be interested to partake, to take a position in this play. You're just reading the cards that you see right there, for example. So there's no preparatory work that you need stress over. Please check it out. Would love to see you there.
Oh, maybe. If not, I wish you all the best. And I'm sure we're all the richer for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you. With
Good
that,
evening.
ladies and
All the
gentlemen,
best.
ends tonight's broadcast of Alexander
Thank you.
Hamilton live from Independence Hall.
Wonderful. I'll give you a few round of applause. Thank you.
Lovely.
Good evening.
Lovely. Good evening. When he's done talking.